Hello, everyone. Welcome back.
Hello.
This Week in Thought, Episode 7. It is March 2nd, 2023. All three of us are here today, so once again, as always, I'm Chunky. In the middle, that's Kassig, and over on the right, that's Redmed. And it's been a while now since we got Episode 6 out. Episode 6 was interesting. I apologize for the video not cropping that correctly, so there was kind of looked a little different maybe than prior episodes, but for those that watch it, I think you'll agree that content was very interesting. We did about the deepest dive in metaphysics that we had done up to this point. A ton of very interesting topics were explored. If you haven't watched it, again, I'd recommend the viewers go back and watch it. And it's in that playlist now, that season 1 playlist. So if you've got that, you can kind of watch them all in order right from there and catch episode 6 before you watch this. And the reason I say that is because Redmed was not with us during episode 6, but he did have a chance to watch it. And so I think today the thing we're going to talk about, at least we're going to start out talking about, is his response to some of the things that were discussed. There were a lot of topics covered in episode 6. So I'm going to turn it over to Redmed and let him lead from here.
Cool. First, the most that I picked up off of, which I thought was the most interesting out of that episode, was the reincarnation and a little bit on this first topic that I'm going to start with. I don't remember what the exact lines that you guys said that brought this up, but the question is that I'm going to pose to you is, do you exist only in my mind? If so, then am I really smarter than what I think I am because of your guys' different backgrounds, different education, and different hobbies and philosophy and that type of stuff? Or is this a dream that I haven't woke up from? Do I really have a body? Or what?
Yeah, I think, it's a lot about what we talked about. I think my opinion is we can't really know.
No, and I should have started. I wanted to start off with that sentence, but I didn't. A lot of it is exactly what you just said. We just don't know, which I kind of believe makes every philosophical discussion bullshit. How can you sit here and philosophize about reincarnation or dream states or this and that when if we don't know, it's all just a bunch of made up shit?
I will jump in there real quick and say that what you're talking about, Redmed, you're describing, again, generally they call it the solipsistic worldview. Solipsism is basically saying, so it's based on the root word solo, meaning just one, just myself, my perspective, and I'm the only one that exists. Everything else is a dream, or it's a hallucination, or it's like a virtual reality or something like that. And there's a lot of different forms that the solipsistic belief take, but they all have that same net effect which you're describing, which is it posits that there's only one consciousness and everything else is just part of what the simulation of that consciousness is. When you say all philosophy is bullshit, I would say I agree that the parts of philosophy that speculate about reality are bullshit, and to me that's metaphysics for sure. And a lot of epistemology, because there's no way, well, again, pre-phenomenologically, we can't get to certainty, and that's usually the criteria of the old epistemology, the pre-phenomenological epistemology. If you do away with the criteria of certainty and you're just looking at, well, how do things appear, which is really the drive of phenomenology, at least the way I understand it, now at least we can have a discussion about not what things actually are, what exists, but how things appear to me. I can report it, you can report it. We can have conversations about the similarities or differences between the observations that we report, and maybe that can help us to have a better understanding of, well, our circumstances or each other, even though it never actually purports to speculate about the nature of reality whatsoever. So I would say I'm sort of in your camp on this one, Redmed, in that I'm not terribly interested in metaphysics or really even epistemology. I am very interested, however, in aesthetics, because I think that drives ethics. And for me, the goal of philosophy is really to talk about ethics. It's how should we be living? Not what exists or what doesn't exist, or what do we think it might be.
Okay. Then that pulls out another question for me. If you say it's all one consciousness, is it my consciousness? Are you made up? Are you made up, Kassig? I mean, and you're really just a figment in my head that I'm discussing with, but Chunky over here in the next pod from the Matrix has a completely different reality that he's working with, and I just happen to make you up.
When you get into biases and different things like that, we don't know. And I think it works on a spectrum where, some people may perceive reality closer to the actual reality, and some people aren't really in the same world as us. I think there are different degrees. Like, I think that like a narcissist could really not believe that other people exist in a real way. Like, only insofar as, like, these people provide me validation. They're real. When they don't, they're kind of not. They're just numbers, disposable. There's tons of ways you can dehumanize people. But, solipsism's a tough one. We can say that we think that there's objective reality, but, you never know. So I think it is kind of bullshitty, but I think that we all need a narrative. Or some people do. Some people do. They need a, why we're here, where we're going. But things need to be put into context. So I think philosophy is good with that. It's good with, teaching how we're supposed to live. But yeah, I think right now with the metaphysics, we're just sort of getting to a place where we can have common work towards actual, how people should function, and virtues versus rules, and all of the further topics down the line.
Okay. So my next thing was with reincarnation. I've always had an interest in that. I've never done really much research with it, but it's just been kind of an interesting thought for me. And my big question that has always puzzled me with reincarnation is, if my soul reincarnates into this new baby over here, and now I inhabit that one, after I die, of course, how many souls are out there? Because really, there's how many trillions of people on the earth now? And when reincarnation came up, how many hundreds of thousands of people were on the earth? Or maybe millions, I don't know. But I mean, where did they come from? Or are they just soulless bodies walking around because they ran out of souls wherever they're ever manufactured?
Some would say that there's one soul, so it's just a matter of, how much ever you need, it's there, because it's the only thing that actually exists. But that kind of gets into the weeds a bit.
If there's one soul, then we're God.
We're reality.
I mean, it's been interesting. It's always been a thought, but I started to get more, I don't know, I wouldn't say cynical about it, but more doubtful of it because of that situation. How can this person be born / reincarnated when there wasn't that many souls to begin with, when the reincarnation thought came into whoever thought it up? Because it just doesn't make sense now.
I'll tell you. Go ahead.
I think it doesn't make sense is kind of the main point. It's a lot of it probably is rationalization, I would assume. But I think as long as it stays nonviolent, most philosophies can be accommodated. But unfortunately, with fanaticism, usually it's I'm right, you're wrong, and I'm going to violently make you agree with me.
Yeah, so this is very interesting, and I will just say that as a an atheist materialist, of course, I'm going to take science's answer, and I'm going to say that one of your questions there, RedMed, was how many souls are there? Well, that's a math problem, I think, right? We can say that in any given time, there's a certain number of people that are alive. And let's assume for a second that the soul, if it exists, there's a unique soul for every person. Now, that doesn't address Kassig's second premise, and I'll get to that in a second. But let's say for a second everybody has a unique soul. You could say that, well, whatever time in history you had the most number of living people, that's the minimum number of souls that must exist for them to all have individual souls at a time. So right now we live at a time in history where I think we got, 7 billion, or is it 8 billion people on the earth, something like that? So there would have to be 7 billion or 8 billion distinct souls. And then it begs an interesting question, which is, in those prior eras where we had fewer people, I mean, for at least recorded history, we know that population growth has generally been on an upward trend. In those prior eras, well, I guess there were souls sitting on the bench, to use a baseball metaphor, just waiting for, hey, somebody put me in, coach. Like I'm ready to go to bat, and then at some point, oh, okay, we're going to create another ball field, and 9 of you that were sitting on the bench can go over and form a new team, and then you'll get to go up to bat. And so, in theory, you could say that, well, we've just been expanding the number of ball fields, and so more people are getting to play, but all those souls, in theory, would have been existing and sitting on the bench back in the beginning. Now, I don't advocate that theory at all. I'm saying that's how the math would have to explain it if, in fact, everybody's got a unique soul. But the thing that Kassig said that I think is a little more interesting, because it's a monistic view, meaning that the idea that there's only one thing, is that what if there's only one so-called soul, or energy pattern, or entity, or whatever you want to call it, and this thing can just take a bunch of forms? And again, I sound like a scientist here, but I think this is a topology problem. And in topology, they talk all the time about how shapes can be distorted. They can start as one thing, and they can be distorted and take on another shape. So, like, think about a ball made of like Jello or something, or jelly. That's not a good example. So, like an amoeba, it could be shaped like a sphere, but it could also be distorted into something that's got, let's say, tentacles, fingers. It could have different sides. It could have 5 fingers that extend from it, and from the perspective of each of the 5 fingers, it sees that there are 4 other things. Now, it may go, well, I'm a soul, but yet those other things look like souls, so maybe there are 5 souls, when in reality, it's not realizing that it's connected to one larger thing that has just been distorted topologically to take on the shape of a 5-fingered entity instead of the sphere that maybe it started as. Now, I think that's sort of the topological explanation for how you have one soul that explains all the different people that we have out there, and the belief, the perception on all their part that they each have unique souls. For what it's worth, I disagree with that completely, because I don't think there is such a thing as a soul. And in my explanation, there's just consciousness created by brains. And so whenever you've got a human, if it's got a brain with a neocortex, it produces a consciousness. It thinks that it's aware. And so it may go on to dream up an explanation and say, well, I'll call this a soul, and I'll believe that it's transcendent, and then it continues on through time, and it can reincarnate, and I think all that's made up. Personally, that's my take on it. But again, that's metaphysical speculation. Do we really need to get into it? Well, I say we got to get into it only if there are people that are using their metaphysics to justify their ethics. If they say, because I have a soul, therefore I should act this way or that way, that's where I say, wait a second, ignore your metaphysics for a second, and let's dig down to the aesthetics that make you think you should act one way or another based upon the presence or absence of a soul. And we haven't gone there yet, because I think that's a whole separate discussion, but I think the discussion is heading in that direction.
Yeah, it kind of is.
I think we're laying the groundwork for that conversation. One thing with philosophy, one thing you can do, this goes back to, I don't remember the exact name of it, but it's a Jainist idea. I think it's the blind men and the elephant. It's where there are 3 blind guys and an elephant. They don't know, they've never seen an elephant, so they don't know what it is. So you have one person touching the tail, one person, touching the trunk, one person, touching the side. And they all report back about, I'm sensing this about this thing. And the other ones are like, I'm sensing this. And together, hopefully, you can put together a pattern from each person's perspective of what they're experiencing. Which is why I think that's one thing that philosophy can do. It can bring our semi-solipsistic views together, and hopefully we can come to a better consensus. At least one that we can live in peace with each other.
And it does that through phenomenology from the epistemological side. That's the key to keep the discussion going, I think. One other thing I'll mention just about sort of the process of philosophy that you're talking about there, RedMed. I think you're very much doing exactly what all philosophers do, in that you're calling shenanigans. You're saying, well, this is bullshit because it doesn't stand up to my own scrutiny. I'm scrutinizing, I'm looking at this, and I'm putting it under a lot of pressure, and things don't seem to add up. And I think that, to me, that's the mechanism of philosophy. That's what you're doing. You're like describing the steps that I think every person should take personally, maybe in discussion with others because you can learn a lot from other people or by reading, but definitely every person should take those steps in that journey of their life. It was a quote, I think it was Socrates, and he said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." And so really this process, the value of philosophy is the examination of your life. Only through examining it can you determine what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, and really you're kind of understanding, you're digging down to find what your values are so you can adjust your actions to be more in line with your values. I mean, to me, I think that's sort of the purpose of it. That's why we're doing it.
Okay. Now this is just kind of a silly question. Deja vu, is that just a glitch in the program of reincarnation?
Glitch is something. But
maybe not. Maybe not reincarnation. Maybe like Chunky said, I don't remember exactly, but it was something like we're kind of like an AI type thing where you can just wipe the hard drive, but it doesn't get completely wiped, and now you've got this little glitch called deja vu that we named it, and that's just a little tiny memory of the previous iteration. I don't know. That's just kind of a thought that I had while I was watching the last episode.
I remember that in the movie The Matrix, they talk about, I think, deja vu being what they called a glitch in the Matrix, which was basically a program that wasn't faithful. Like there were little errors that would be caused. They would be seen as things that were repeated loops from the perspective of the people trapped in the Matrix. But yeah, and what you're describing, I think that sort of makes equally plausible sense in terms of describing it. That wouldn't be my explanation, because again, as a rationalist taking a scientific approach, I'd say, well, deja vu is probably what they call, and again, there's a term for this where you I think it's called apophenia, where you tend to create or you tend to imagine patterns that aren't actually there. The human mind is like again, the work of Jeff Hawkins at Numenta, all the research they've done points to that pattern detection, basically seeing your prior experiences as a bunch of inputs which essentially build up patterns and allow you to make predictions about what's going to happen in the future. That's their understanding, at least from what my reading was of the work that he published. That's their understanding of what human consciousness is doing. So again, I think he calls it like the memory prediction framework theory of cognition, and I'll try to look that up and put a link in the description for anybody that wants to read about it. But if you subscribe to, let's say, the model that they're talking about of consciousness, I mean, really, you could say, well, what's deja vu? Well, maybe that's your brain making up a pattern and incorrectly assigning a time index to something, saying, oh, this is familiar. This is so familiar, it must have been a memory. It must be something I've seen in the past. When maybe it's just a similar pattern to a pattern you had experienced previously. I mean, it might be your brain doing like a smoothing function, like a normalizing function of a perception to a memory. That would be my explanation, but Kassig may have a different take on that.
Well, just that it could be it could be when your predictive functioning is working right. Like your brain predicted the next 5 minutes so well, it's like you've already done it before. So it could just be it's working. It's done the job so well that you can't distinguish. So, but yeah, I guess it comes down to who knows.
Well, quick sidebar: do you guys experience deja vu a lot, or any more, or did you used to, or
every once in a while I do?
Like mine reference dreams. Like, I remember having, when I have deja vu, it's deja vu of me dreaming about this time.
Interesting. Wild. Sorry, it's interesting to me.
Yeah, and who knows if it's, the human mind is kind of, be nice if we could rewire it a little bit better, but I think we had that discussion last week.
All right, well, those were the things I had.
Well, that's,
so, yeah.
That's cool.
I did, like I said, pre-recording, the last bit of the episode, I kind of just was like, I'm not really into this right now. But so, whatever you guys got after this would be good.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't know what.
All the important stuff.
Yeah, Kassig's probably got a whole bunch of topics that he wants to delve into. I know that we did a little bit of planning, the three of us, prior to this episode, where we sort of mapped out the next few episodes and what the topics were going to be. And I know that the next one, episode 8, is going to focus on priorities, individual priorities, personal priorities. Now, if we've exhausted all the metaphysics and there's nothing else we want to talk about, we could move on and start going into individual priorities and look for similarities or differences. Or we could go back to, there was kind of the big open topic from a couple episodes where all three of us was on it, was values, shared values and virtues. We had started to go kind of deep into what do we think are common values or virtues among society. And again, I think those topics kind of may merge together. Maybe we sort of want to turn the discussion in that direction, though, unless anybody's got other, metaphysics or epistemology or anything they want to cover before that.
Not really. I think we've set up, at least set up a basis to move forward.
Yeah, well, I guess we could go. I wish we could kind of rewind this, because there was something that you had said about, I forget how the conversation went, but it went from like, that goes into epistemology. I'm like, yeah, it does. Maybe we should start discussing that, even though it's a huge topic.
Sure. So, in the subject of epistemology, so skepticism, I think, is kind of the main, foray, the main branch that most epistemologists will take, where they'll say, well, how can I be certain? How do I know that what I believe I perceive actually corresponds to an external reality? And that was sort of like the second half of our discussion. I think last time Kassig and I were sort of saying, well, you can't be certain. And not only can you not be certain, but the pursuit of certainty is itself it's a dangerous path, because it'll consume a lot of time, a lot of energy, it'll get you nowhere, and it'll leave you extremely frustrated with the process. So phenomenology is sort of the exit door out the back of epistemological uncertainty, because it lets you no longer have to worry about being certain. You simply say, well, this is how I perceive it versus this is how you perceive it, and we all describe what we perceive, and then we look for similarities in that and say, maybe that corresponds to an external reality, maybe not, but at least it gives us a basis for moving forward with our ethics. It seems to sort of be kind of the page I think Kassig and I had gotten to. I don't know if that's the epistemological avenue you wanted to talk about. Did you want to talk more about phenomenology, or did you want to talk about skepticism, or?
Do you think that did anyone be certain of anything in the universe?
That, I don't know. I think so. I think I can be certain that there's air, that I am physically touching things in my surroundings. I have a heart that pumps and blood that goes round and round throughout my body. But sure, there are things that you can't be certain of. Like, you can't be certain of what happens after death. I personally have no idea, but I think you just die. That's it. I don't know, you've got kind of a smirk on your face there, Chunky.
My smirk is that I'm watching Kassig's response, and I can almost see him sharpening his claws as you start to describe things in your personal life and experience that you say you're certain about. And I suspect you're about to see him unleash a torrent of skepticism and questions that will tear that apart. But maybe not.
Not a torrent. But if we were in a dream, you could play that. Are we in a dream that's then real? You can get into that infinite recursion loop. Like, does it ever stop? Is there an objective reality, or is it all just dream?
Well, if it's all just dream, when do we wake up? Do we wake up when
we don't?
This dream ends, and now all of a sudden I wake up, or the dream ends with this form's death, and then tomorrow night I start into another dream with what could be called as reincarnation.
And see, that gets into the simulation thing. Like, if you were in a really good simulation, it might be simulating your heart and all the other examples that you gave. But It appears like that is the case, but that's the phenomenology.
It is phenomenology. Boy, this is... But, Redmed, let me ask you, when you say you're certain of... You described certain things, like physiological things that you're experiencing, and you said that I can be certain of. And just to use Kassig's example, what makes you certain that that's the awake state and your dream state is the dream state and that it's not inverted? And that the dream state corresponds to the actual reality, and then what you think of as your waking state is actually the dream, the hallucination being had by what you think is your dreaming self.
So, let me see if I understand this. This waking hours, for me, is the dream state. When I go to sleep in this section, that's my actual waking hours. Is that what you...
That's the question I'm asking, is that possible in your mind? Could that be equally plausible as the way you think it is, where you think this is the awake state and the dream state is the sleeping state? Is it possible that those two could be flipped?
Sure. I mean, why couldn't it be? You don't remember all of your dreams. There's sections throughout the night that when you are asleep, you have no dreams. There's nothing that happens other than going in and out of the REM cycles. So I guess that could be possible.
So is the physiology of yourself in your dreams the same as it is of yourself in the waking time? And if not, why is that equally plausible as something you could be certain about as being the actual state? Given that, like, maybe things like your heartbeat, your metabolism, your breathing, at least when I'm dreaming, I'm not aware of those things the way I am when I'm, let's say, so-called awake.
I don't know.
And I think that's the point. I think that's the point that we all get to. With the metaphysics, like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's bullshit.
I will say that the thing that I love about phenomenology is once we get away from the need for certainty, we can start just looking for similarities in reported experiences. And one thing I'll say is that when I have conversations with people like you all, but I'm saying not just you, everybody I talk to in my so-called waking state, there's a lot more similarity and congruity. It's congruous in what they report to me. So to me, that at least seems to be, let's say, a more consistent simulation. I don't know if it's real or not, but it's far more consistent than my dream state, which, by the way, is all over the place. I have crazy dreams that take on narratives you wouldn't believe, and sometimes they defy what I think of as the laws of physics and biology. They don't make sense, and then I snap out of it when I wake up, and I come back to what's this very consistent reality. Now, I don't know that it's real for sure, but man, it seems a hell of a lot more consistent than my dream state, which is why I tend to think that this is the so-called real one, and that's the dream state, but I have no proof of that whatsoever, and I make no assertions about actual reality.
Well, when you go into, like, lucid dreaming, which I think we've talked about before, when you take conscious control of the dream state, if you get really good at that, does the dream state become more coherent at that point? Now,
Yes.
I think we're in a shared reality here, but, we don't really know any of the rules of that other form of that state, really.
Yes, it does for me. And again, Redmed may have a different experience here of his lucid dreaming if he has it. But when I have it, it's almost like when I take conscious control of that subconscious dream state, I inject the rules of physics and reality and behavior into it. And so it starts to carry much more continuity in lucid dreams than in non-lucid dreams. In non-lucid dreams, it's like all bets are off. But in lucid dreams, and maybe it's my own belief sort of brings a stability to the dream state. I'm still limited by, like, the faults of the game world, like the anxiety stuff where I can't move as fast, I can't run as fast as I used to, but all of the thought processes are much more similar to they are in my awake state, to what they are in my awake state when I'm lucid dreaming versus non-lucid dreaming.
I wonder how much you inject into the waking world.
I don't know.
I wonder how malleable each is. That's
it may be.
Psychologists.
I haven't tried to inject a lot of my, let's say, imagination into altering my reality and what I think is the waking state. It may be possible. I haven't seen a lot of evidence of that, but I haven't really pursued a lot of it, so it may be possible. I mean, I don't know. Kassig, do you have, like, some experiences that you could, report that would maybe not refute that, but open it up a little wider and say, well, here's what I've seen that's...
I'll have to find the subreddit, but there was something I did. It's I think some of the owl, ritual of the owl, practice of the owl, or whatever. But what you do is you say to yourself, while you're meditating, I'm going to see owls for the next little bit of time. I'm going to see owls for the next month. You do that for half hour for a week, and your attention turns to focus on that, and all you'll see is owls. So I mean, that's a way you can show that your mind works as a filter.
As a filter, yeah, but I mean, I look at that like that's apophenia. That's you creating patterns,
sure.
Dreaming up patterns that maybe don't exist. I don't know.
Sure. And I think you're using it I think it's just you're showing yourself that your brain operates as a focus.
Yes.
So whatever you focus on, that's what you see.
Yes.
Just as a way to show, to prove to yourself that your brain makes up a whole heck of a lot of your existence.
Totally. I don't know.
Brain makes up too much of the existence. As far as dreaming goes, I don't think I've ever been able to control my dream. I've been able to... this is kind of weird. I've been able to... I guess it's lucid dreaming, where I knew what I was doing in the dream, and I also knew what I was doing in the non-dream. So, like, I'm asleep at night, and I'm like, I really shouldn't do this, but I have to kick this guy in the feet or in the leg or something to get out of whatever situation I was in. Well, no, I'm sorry. The situation was, I remembered it now. I had to kick a door in my dream, and I'm like, I should not be kicking this because I'm going to kick the person that's next to me. And sure as shit, I kicked my wife in the middle of the dream. She woke up, I woke up at the exact same time, and I'm like, oh my God, I am so sorry. It was a dream. I have no idea why I did that to you. But I knew in my head, in my brain, I'm like, this is going to happen. I need to stop this. But the dream took over again, and I couldn't stop it. Aside from the funny part of that, it was actually kind of scary that the reality and the dream state mixed so much that I couldn't control it, but I saw it all happen.
I've had similar experiences. Yeah, and
is that what you would call lucid dreaming?
Close.
Or is that just fucked up?
No, Kassig's got a good definition. I think he had that he used for it.
I'm just trying to phrase this. Sorry. It's consciously being able to take control. So, like you're sleeping. One of the main way that they teach now is where, I think this was from Carlos Castaneda in the 70s, where you look at your hands for like a week or so, multiple times a day, so that it becomes a habit. And you look at your hands and go, am I dreaming now? Am I dreaming now? And you do, and then eventually you'll start doing that in your dream. And the idea is you look at your hands, and in your dream you realize, oh, I'm dreaming, and hopefully that flips you into the controllable state.
Yeah, I've never had that then. I don't think I've ever been able to control my dreams. I've woken up and I've been like, I've got to get back to that dream and try and change this, but it's never worked.
You've got to work at it. I think you've got to keep a dream journal, and most people don't have the time or care. Although back 20 years ago,
care.
What's that?
I don't think it's the time or care. I think it's the fact that you don't remember enough of the dream most of the time to be able to get in there and change what you wanted to change.
Yeah, I've had so I would say the lucid dreaming, for me the distinguishing characteristic to decide whether or not a dream that you just had was a lucid dream or not is while you were in it, when you wanted to make a decision, were you able to make a decision and then cause the next act? In a lucid dream, I was able to make choices, and in a non-lucid dream, I was more like somebody just along for the ride. Like my consciousness was just following along what my character was doing in the narrative, and even though I had desire, I couldn't act on it. I couldn't implement my intention and make a decision. So I've had like very few that I would consider actually lucid dreams. And again, Kassig and I talked about this on one episode where flight. I don't know if you've experienced flight in a dream. To me, that's like the most liberating thing. And so whenever I have a lucid dreaming state, I go for flight. I try to fly. I just want to have that. It's like the weight of the world's lifted off your shoulders when you can fly. I mean, you feel superhuman. At least I do. I don't know. I have this desire to be like disconnected from the ground and moving around so that I can see things from a higher level and not be burdened by. Boy, this is like a psychological review of my screwed up issues. But I think it's social anxiety disorder. Like most of my anxiety, I realize in life comes with interacting with people and not living up to the expectations that I think they have for me. And when I'm in that dream state and I can fly, I disconnect myself from the people. Like I'm not out of the world, I'm still up in the air, but the people can't get to me and negatively impact me with all their cynicism and their critical thoughts. I think that's why I like flight so much, probably.
I don't think I've ever flown in a dream. I've done a lot of falling, and I usually wake up before I actually fall.
Wow.
But I don't think I've even fell to the point where it was like I hit the ground or I've fallen and I wake up falling in a sweat. I've always, as far as I can remember, I've always been able to, I almost fell and then I wake up and it's like, oh, well that was weird. But I don't think I've ever flown.
We got to get a dream interpreter on.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
The first thing they say is, you guys are so screwed up. I need 5-hour sessions with each of you all separate before we try to do this on a podcast.
No, I think it'll be, I got to go.
I got to go. You guys are messed up. Good luck to you.
My phone just rang outside in the car.
Yeah.
I'll see you later.
What the hell is wrong with you people? No.
Like when I when I worked in customer service, like sometimes you'd walk up to a person and you'd tap them on the shoulder and they'd turn around and they'd have so much plastic surgery on their face, like and you'd have to train yourself to not like be shocked by the weird, freaky plastic. Oh yeah, the women with the plastic surgery, it would.
God, now that we're talking about this, I will say that one of the books by Jeff Hawkins, he talks about why it is that we recoil in horror whenever we see somebody with like a disfigurement. Like, let's say an amputee. That's the example he gives, I think, in the book. And he says it has to do with the fact that our brains are attuned to home in on things that look like patterns we're familiar with, but that have differences. And so when you see a person that's like an amputee, you're going, well, I expected to see 2 arms and 2 legs. I'm seeing 2 arms and 1 leg. So immediately all of my attention is drawn to it because it's like my brain wants to investigate and try to understand why this doesn't fit the predicted pattern of what a person should look like. So that's like sort of like a cognitive psychology explanation for why we recoil in horror when we see people that have, disfigurements or, like you said, bad plastic surgery or whatever.
Like it's our hunter instinct. Because, when you're looking for, little, our looking at patterns was sort of set up so that we'd see little things crawling through the brush so we could eat it. Or, it's either prey or a predator. You either run or eat it.
Yeah.
Because, for thousands of years, we developed, in a time when there were some very dangerous creatures where, saber-toothed tiger, if you can't see it coming, you're their dinner. And if you can, it's your dinner.
Creatures, you're right, but man, I think it's not just that. It's more than that. It's anything in the environment. Because the environment is full of both, like, hazards that have to be avoided and opportunities that have to be, like, detected so
Sure.
that you capitalize on them. And I remember there was this quote that stuck out in me from one of the Frank Herbert books, and the Leto character says, he goes, every sense organ that you possess is an instrument for measuring change. Does that tell you nothing? Like, he was trying to emphasize the importance of that nothing is static. Everything in the universe is change, and the senses, your whole body is just a collection of tools to detect all those changes. So, like, don't deny change, don't reject that, embrace it. Just go, everything's always in flux, and I should be thankful that I have the ability to perceive those changes and act upon them. Was kind of like a central tenet to that character's ideology, which I agree with, by the way. So, like, other things worth talking about, there's, I don't know if we want to go down this road, but there's that link I sent to process philosophy. which is sort of the manifestation, like it's an ontology that says, well, there's no such thing as actual objects. It's just things that are in flux. It's just changes. So everything in the universe should just be seen as patterns of changes.
Like pretty much the quantum field is the thing that exists, and everything else just sort of shadows that it makes.
And we say the thing that exists as if it's an object, but I think the process philosophers will go, no. I mean, break it down to the level of quanta, and those are just things that are in flux. It's states of change. I don't know.
Sure. Like particles is a way of time.
Maybe. I don't know that it's...
Oh, sorry.
I don't know at the microscopic level if it's important to know whether it's a structure that's like a collection of quantum particles that are changing, or if it's just flux in reality that we're imagining are comprised of particles because we have to think of everything in terms of objects. I wonder if the process philosophers might say, well, no, the need to define things in terms of objects is just your psychological need, but the reality is it's just a collection of sets of changes all around you. It's interesting.
Or it can be explained with that paradigm.
Right. I mean, without going too far into Aristotelian causality, this is kind of one of my areas of interest. Aristotle thought there were four ways to answer the question, what is the cause of something? So like if you say A is the cause of B, B is the effect of A, right? So there's your cause-effect relationship. And if you ask about, well, what's the causal relationship between A and B, he said that there's four possible ways you could look at that. The formal, the material, the efficient, and the final. So the formal cause, he learned this from his teacher Plato. It was the idea that for everything that you see, every object you see, there's a form which is the shape of all objects of that type. It's the category that comes from. So let's say, for example, you're talking about a pencil. So if a pencil's the object, the formal cause of a pencil is pencilhood or pencilness, which is to say anything that's got, it's the category of things that are made of wood, that have graphite, that have rubber on one end, and they're banded with a piece of, let's say, aluminum or tin or whatever to connect it. And so anything that has that's the essence called pencilness. That's the form of pencilness. And every pencil you see is just a single manifestation. It's an instance of that pencil class. So he said that's the formal cause. The material cause, Aristotle said, is the atoms, the molecules that make up the pencil. The efficient cause, he said, it's the agent that transforms the material from the raw state to the finished state. So in like the case of pencil, it'd be like the pencil maker or the pencil making machine. And then the interesting thing, I think, is the fourth type of cause that he calls the final cause, which is what Aristotle says is the purpose for which the thing was created. So with a pencil, you could say, well, the final cause must be what, like drawing or writing? But so it begs the question, when you talk about what's the cause of something, that final cause, who's the arbiter, who's the authority on what a final cause actually is? And again, with a pencil, that's a relatively simple set of questions to answer. When you get into something like a human, and you ask the question, what's the final cause of a human? Now, I think you open up a whole new branch of philosophy. Now you're talking about ethics. And some people will try to ground that on metaphysics, and others will try to ground it on aesthetics. And I think that's where we're going to find a lot of fruitful ground in the future. Is what's the final cause of humans? For what purpose were humans created? And I think everybody's got different ideas on that. So,
worm food.
Worm food.
Well, and then you can get into can they be self-created? Can they help make themselves into something as part of the final cause? Like that we weren't created per se, but we can help create ourselves as a species going forward into the future. I know you've been kind of waiting to dig into all that, so...
Well, I sent you guys a couple links, and I don't know if you've had the time to read it. It's interesting. There was an article a few years ago. I guess he's an MIT professor, Jeremy England, and he's been talking about, this theory of dissipation-driven adaptation. It's a physics explanation for how you get organic material arising from inorganic material. And I read that, and I about fell out of my seat, because for the longest time, I always thought, well, the value of metaphysics, and again, I'm talking about transcendental metaphysics, the value is that it gives me an explanation for the final cause for the purpose of human life. I mean, again, I guess it's no surprise. Maybe we haven't said it explicitly on the podcast, but I'll go ahead and say it now. I think all three of us, if memory serves, spent quite a few years in Catholic school. So we had upbringing in an institution that specialized in a certain type of transcendental metaphysics, and they wove it very, very deftly into the curriculum at every level. We were taught through their religious rites, but we were also taught through academic instruction to think like transcendental metaphysicists, I think. And you guys correct me if I'm wrong, you maybe have different memories of what it was like growing up in Catholic school, but by the time we were, even high school level, I would say we were dyed-in-the-wool transcendental metaphysicists, whether we said it explicitly or not. We believed in things like a soul, we believed in things like a creator deity, and we believed that that creator deity had a purpose when that creator deity made our souls, and that our destiny of our souls was going to be judged by that creator deity based upon the decisions that were made. Kassig, you're shaking your head. Did I mischaracterize that there?
Well, no. Personally, I was always resistant to it, but I think it still had an effect anyways. That was my sort of...
not our response to it, but would you agree that that was the model that we were taught? Am I characterizing it fairly? Okay.
Oh, sure.
All right, so Redmed, yeah. So you had the same. You had the same take when you left that institution.
Yeah, even while I was in high school, it was I looked back at my grade school days in the Catholic schools, and it was like you are forming this human to believe your ways. You are not letting them believe anything else. You are not letting them discover anything on their own. You are forming them to believe that this is the way it is, and it's still that way.
Yes, that was my experience, and I firmly rejected that. And I know that when I tried to reject it, I tried to, let's say, stand up and resist that in the institution. I was squashed. That was not tolerated, and I was threatened with consequences if I didn't back down from my position. And I had no leverage, so I backed down, as a child will do when they're threatened with overwhelming odds and no recourse. However, as an adult, I reject it fully. I mean, I would say the stronger I got pushed into that transcendental metaphysics by Catholicism in my youth, the stronger I've rebelled as an atheist, the deeper I've gone into atheism as an adult. And so as an atheist and as an adult, I sort of rejected those tenets, but I didn't have a good alternative explanation. I always would ask myself in the back of my mind, well, man, what's the final cause if it's not a God? If there's no creator God, if there's no soul, there's no heaven and hell, why is it that I exist? What should I be going towards? And I'll tell you, for the longest time, it bothered me because I thought, well, shit, man, I don't know if there's no God telling me what I should be doing. What's the basis of my ethics? What should I do? How do I know what I should do? For what purpose was I created? And for the longest time, it baffled me, and I thought, well, I'm just wandering aimlessly with no objective because I have no transcendental metaphysics to guide me. And then I read that article about the Jeremy England paper or theory, and I thought, there it is. There's the explanation. For those that haven't read it, please go read it. Again, I'll try to find a link to it. I'll put it in the description. Basically, he says that dissipation-driven theory of adaptation. Organic matter arises from inorganic matter because organic matter can do something far more efficiently than inorganic matter. And that is, it can dissipate heat. It can maximize locally the second law of thermodynamics. It can pursue entropy at a far greater rate than in its inanimate counterparts that it evolved from. So you say, well, okay, what does that mean? Well, it means that after the Big Bang, you've got stars and planets that form, and on those planets, you've got inorganic material, dust, dirt, right? All kinds of hydrogen, oxygen, different gases. However, once you get to organic compounds, the creatures that emerge from that, the one thing that they do is activity. They burn through energy like you wouldn't believe. Hell, their very existence depends on metabolism, which is the process of converting potential energy in the form of inorganic matter, or sometimes other organic matter, into kinetic energy and burning it away so it can't be reused. I mean, all living things share one ultimate feature, which is that they consume energy at a much greater rate than inanimate matter. And so I go, well, there's your purpose. there's your final cause for humanity right there, and it has nothing to do with metaphysics. Hell, physics gives you the explanation. We're heat sinks. We're heat sinks. Our job is to take energy and dissipate it. Dissipate it. Just like a heat sink on a CPU, on a computer. Sure. Its job is to take all the heat that's concentrated on the CPU and dissipate it out into the case, where the case fans blow it out so that the CPU doesn't overheat. Well, that's us. The Earth is the CPU, and we're the heat sink on it. I'm sorry, we're the CPU and the heat sink. The Earth is more like the energy flowing through the motherboard. Sorry, go ahead.
Do you think that is a purpose, or just something that we do?
It's a purpose in the sense of physics that it's an objective toward which things are drawn, toward which reality is drawn. Not a designed purpose, not like an intentional purpose on the part of a creator, but it's the objective of the universe is to get to thermodynamic equilibrium, which is maximum entropy.
Okay.
And to do that, it's going to take the path of least resistance, which is the thing that can burn through energy the fastest, and that's us.
Sure. I just wanted to verify if you thought it was just a process, or if it had some sort of design. What's that? The design.
Intelligent design. Yeah, that's not my jam. I don't think there's a thing that's doing the intelligent designing. I think it's the process of the universe. But sorry, go ahead.
I didn't think so. I just wanted to clarify, just in case someone at home was wondering.
Right. And I will mention that as I've been digging into this, Jeremy England is the guy, the MIT professor that I was sort of starting to read the article about. As I dug into it, I saw on a forum someone mentioned, Ilya Prigogine, who was, I think, maybe, I'm not sure, Russian or Ukrainian physicist, but again, I think early 20th century, first half of 20th century, he was talking about, dissipation-driven adaptation as a process for within physical structures before Jeremy England was. So anyway, I've been starting to read about Ilya Prigogine, and again, just reading about Prigogine, he was the one that kind of pointed me in the direction of process philosophy, which Kassig, I thought that was right up your alley, given a lot of the things you'd talked about previously.
It is, and we should do an episode on that. Eventually, I'd like to do one on placebo effect, and biases. Biases are huge, and I don't know if that's still part of the metaphysics, or if that would be just sort of obstacles to everything. But yeah, those are the two I'd like to go into. But I know you've been chomping at the bit get into so I'm more than happy to let you pick the topics for however long, and then.
Well,
what was next week or next episodes?
Next episode is pretty interesting because we're starting to talk about personal priorities, which is sort of, I think, the foundation of decision making, and it's really important. I don't want to derail that. I sort of dropped this little sprinkle of an idea here, but of course it warrants a much bigger discussion, because even if we all agree to that and we say, well, yeah, maybe there is this physics-based explanation for final cause for living things. Well, now we need to talk about values and ethics, the things that come from that, like the results of that. How should we interpret that? How should that influence our behavior in light of that being our purpose versus not? Meaning, for example, if the only job of a living thing is to burn through energy, does it matter what actions they do at all or not? Or do we have to go away from objective final cause for human life and switch to purely subjective final cause, look for similarities in subjective final cause, and say, yeah, we know our job in the physics sense is to burn through energy and get to the omega point, and we're going to do that. We're doing just fine. But in the meantime, there's a whole lot of experience here that we want to try to maximize the value of from an aesthetic sense. We want to maybe minimize suffering and maximize pleasure, possibly for people. So maybe that's why we should shift into axiology and shift away from physics, metaphysics, things like that. I don't know, but I think that's a topic worth discussing, unless you guys go, oh, I've got an immediate, take on that.
Oh, no, not really. I definitely think the next step is ethics and priorities.
I think, I don't know, kind of what I've been wanting to do is a little bit of a homework assignment. And that's for each one of us, to come up with a list of values and virtues and see which ones are the most common between the three of us as far as which are values and which are virtues, and not which is the most, which one we should prioritize the most, but just which are the most common and what we feel are the most valuable.
So do you just want to see the list for the purpose of looking for overlap, or do you want us to describe like the intensity or the significance of that value to us?
Right now, just for overlap.
Okay.
I guess we could just do the overlap and then take those like off of our message board and just take those and then just discuss the ones that overlap the most. Like if we all agree on one that's overlapped, we can talk about that one.
I will do that. I can't wait. That's actually a really cool homework assignment, and I will think about that.
Yeah.
You know, the weird thing is we don't have a ton of time because that next episode's coming up pretty quick on the 7th, Tuesday the 7th. That's 5 days out.
And that one's a pretty important one.
Very important, yeah. Once again, thanks everybody for those who participated. Obviously, everybody that's out there watching on the internet. That's another good episode, episode 7. We're going to be back here in about 5 days to record episode 8. So that's going to be on March 7th, I think. And because of the short time frame in recording these two, it may take us a while before we get both of them edited, and so we may end up dropping both of them pretty quickly in about a week or two here. That's all I had. Do you guys have anything else?
Nope. Just hope everybody has a wonderful day.
Yeah. Enjoy your days.
Amen. And we're getting to springtime here, so the weather's starting to get pretty good. Just about daylight savings time. Indeed, that sounds like a topic for a future episode.
I hate the fact that it's going to get warm and hot and warm.
And stay light much longer, by the way.
Oh, that I don't mind, but
oh,
yeah, just the heat and yeah, it sucks. I hate it.
Anyway, on that note, thanks again, everyone, and we will catch you on next episode. See ya.
Later.
The opinions expressed in the preceding podcast are not necessarily those of the individuals who expressed those opinions. The creators and participants of this podcast hereby absolve themselves of any and all liability for damages that might arise as a result of the viewing, hearing, or acting upon the ideas expressed in this podcast. By watching or listening to this podcast, you hereby agree to defend, indemnify, and hold harmless the creators and participants of this podcast from any and all claims, demands, damages, or liabilities resulting from the experiencing of the contents of this podcast.